My name's Lauren Epstein, and you are listening to You're Hired, broadcasting here from 96.7 FM in Arlington, Virginia. We're excited to have you today. We've got a great show. We are going to talk about the end of resumes. Now, I know everyone who's been listening to this show has a resume. You've probably rewritten it about 1,000 times, hoping that it was phrased and parsed in such a way to get found by a recruiter, and that when someone reads it, it doesn't go into the trash can, right? I know that I've had my resume done recently when I was looking for work, and it's tricky. You want to have a resume that looks good, that's appealing. So we've got a couple of experts today to talk about what's happening in the world of resumes. Everyone has a resume unless you're a government employee. Maybe you don't, I don't know. But if you're not looking for a job or you never looked for a job, then you can turn off the show. But otherwise, you're going to want to listen to this because you're going to hear some tips and tricks and what's new on the horizon for what constitutes that first piece of text, that first piece of information that an employer will find you and then want to talk to you about and start you on your way to a new job. So today I want to introduce my guests. First, I have Mark Feffer. Mark Feffer. I've known Mark for a few years, and he's one of the best human resource journalists in the business. He's been focusing on careers, human resources, and related technology that is needed in our ever-changing world. He writes regularly for HR Magazine and the career site Dice.com, as well as the Huffington Post, Brazen Careerist, and Job Hunt. Brazen Careerist is located right here in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, Lauren, how are you doing? And thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this show. And also, I have our first returning guest. Torin Ellis is here for the second time. Torin is an amazing human capital strategist. His team provides candidates coaching and validation, boot camps for undergraduates. He's done documentary films. He's done hybrid recruiting search and recruitment marketing services. And most recently, and what I find to be the most interesting, is that he won Top Recruiter, which was filmed a year and a half ago?
A year ago.
A year ago. And then also he was on the next Top Recruiter, which was filmed in a castle. And that'll be broadcast in January. We're just talking about that. Welcome to the show, Torin.
Awesome. And thank you for allowing me to return and share my voice with you and your listeners.
I just want to say, just in acknowledging, what we do here, we talk about jobs and careers. And I'm 51, and sometimes I think I know everything, but I get humbled. And the last time Torin was on the show, and we didn't talk about this afterwards, but we talked about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And what occurred for me, what happened to me out of that show was that I learned more about diversity in that show than I'd really thought I knew. When folks would talk to me about diversity and inclusion, or diversity, I would think about folks of different color, people of different genders. And after the show with you and our other guest, it really broadened my viewpoint of diversity is about different ideas. Different people have different ideas. Different people have different experiences. And that's really bringing all that in makes for the strongest possible company, the strongest possible teams, and the best outcomes. So I want to thank you for that because it really made an impact on me. And I just appreciate that you guys, I know they were kind of both patient with me. I was going through my transformation while they were talking. So today we're going to talk about the end of resumes. And I want to just kind of start it off by talking about resumes. I've written a book called You're Hired, Interview Skills to Get the Job. And in my book, I talk about how the purpose of a resume is to get you the interview. That resumes never get you the job. People are rarely hired on their resumes. But that the purpose of the resume is to get you noticed by an employer to have that first phone call or that first in-person interview. And I think that's been changing. Now with the advent of LinkedIn, that people can use LinkedIn to see the projects that you've worked on, and YouTube and other ways of showing your skill set in either video format or audio format, that it isn't just the resume that gets you in. And so I want to hear from our experts today is what they see as the end of the resume, what we should all be kind of thinking about as we go forward in our careers. Mark, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. My first thought is that the resume is not dead yet and is far from dead. There's a lot of folks out there who write and procrastinate or talk about the fact that the resume is going away. And when I talk to human resource managers and recruiters on the ground, and also hiring managers, I find that to be far from the case. It seems to me that what very often is happening is the company or the recruiter will see a resume, then go to LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, some easy online destination to gather a little bit more information about the candidate, get their work, get a sense of their work, and then decide whether or not they want to have the person take the next step and have a phone interview, which hopefully ultimately leads you to an in-person interview. The resume is still kind of the piece of paper, whether it's in electronic form or in physical form, that's handed around between human resources recruiters and ultimately the hiring manager. So the resume's role may be in flux, it may be evolving, but I think it's still very important for candidates to pay attention to having a good resume ready to go.
So, Torin, what is your sense of what a resume has been up until now?
I would say that up until now, it's been static. It's been one of those documents that has, for the most part, remained the same. The pre-identified sections, if you will. But what I think is going to happen in terms of the resume is that it will continue to be important. The content may change, or the name resume may change, but we will need that document, because I don't foresee any way of really understanding and evaluating who a person is in terms of their experiences, accomplishments, their contributions to an organization, how they collaborate and work well inside of teams. I don't see really any other way of getting around having some central document or medium to use to be able to form that opinion.
I remember when I was a kid in the 70s that my mom's resume, and she was a graphic artist, was something that she had to put together, not on a typewriter, but with a printer, like an actual company that does printing. And it was a very complex, expensive process. And she wasn't stuck with like one resume. She had to get like 500 resumes or 250 resumes. And it was a huge commitment to say, this is what my resume is. And even before the advent of computers, if you had a resume, you had to type it up on a typewriter, which could take you, 20 or 30 minutes or more to make sure that it looked right. And now with this, again, I want to just kind of stay back with what resumes have been when people think about resumes. And then in my career, with the advent of technology, I've been able to make a resume on my computer and I can reconfigure it. And the intention always was to have my resume mapped to what I think, and generally it's a guess, that the employer is going to like. Now I could map it to the job description, right? Because the idea of this resume is to say, hey, I'm one of you. I'm good. I'm one of you. I'm going to fit in your culture. And I can tailor the words. And it's easy to go on my computer and make these small changes. So it's very often that people will have multiple resumes. But you're right. You said these pre-identified sections. So there's the name, the address, the ways you can reach me. And then there used to be that objective thing, right, which I think some people still use. And then the chronology. And the chronology is important in that you want to know kind of where they've been and what they've done. Who are they?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that's important is for me when I evaluate a resume, and Mark may have a different approach to this, but when I evaluate a resume, I always start at the bottom and I work my way backwards towards the top. And the reason is because I'm hoping that resume depicts a story of progression. It depicts a story of professional trajectory, that a person has escalated their ability to grow in being responsible, to carry more weight inside of an organization. So when I start at the bottom, I can see how a person has arrived at who they are today. So I just think that it's a central piece of consideration in what it is that we have to do, because otherwise, if I don't have that document to help guide me in evaluation and structuring my conversation, then I have to rely on that person to give all of that to me. And I just don't see that as being an effective exchange, if you will. I need some central piece to kind of start the conversation.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Mark? Because I have some thoughts on that.
Well, I first of all agree that that's what a resume should do. And, before I disagree, let me just give a caveat that I think hiring is sort of like the blind man's elephant. If you know the story that, one blind man felt the elephant's trunk and said, "Oh, an elephant is like a snake." And another blind man felt the elephant's side and said, "Well, the elephant is like a wall." Everyone has just their own little way of doing it. So while I agree with what Torin says about the resume's purpose, I start reading at the top, see how up-to-date someone's skills are and what their most recent work, how closely their recent work matches what my needs are. But then I'm still going to go back again and look at their career path to see sort of how they got there and how they progressed. The challenge is for the job seeker is that there's a number thrown around that says the average resume gets 6 seconds on its first read. So if I think in either Torin's or my case, you kind of have to convince us to read it twice so we can see where you are currently and also understand the path. Because those are two very important things a manager is going to be thinking about when deciding whether or not to take the next step.
And, Mark, if I may just jump in real quick, Lauren, I despise that 6-second statistic that has permeated our industry for the last 2 to 3 years. I think that it's hogwash, and I don't think that any solid recruiter, a person that's interested in evaluating people, is only spending 6 seconds. I don't think that they're only spending 30 seconds. I think with a quality review, we're spending a few minutes looking at a document. We may put it to the side, and then, as Mark said, we'll come back to it and, evaluate it for an even longer period. But I disagree wholeheartedly with that 6-second statistic.
Yeah, and I think it's common. I mean, if folks are not really into what they're doing, they're just looking for buzzwords, right? So let's talk about what we're looking for. When we look at a resume and we only spend 6 seconds, we're probably looking for 2 or 3 words that make us think, well, this person's good.
If I can jump in, I won't, the 6 seconds, whether or not it's exactly the right number, I don't know. But I will say that when I'm faced with 200 resumes, which I was the last time I was seeking to fill a job, I did give them a very quick scan, and there were a couple of things that I could tell right off the bat whether or not I was going to want to spend any more time with it. I was looking for a journalist, for an assistant editor specifically, and our job posting had also specifically said this is not a marketing position, and we are not interested in people with a marketing background. So if I saw in glancing through a resume and on the first pass that the person's entire career had been spent in marketing, I knew that person wasn't for me. So I think that's where the quickness comes in. If somebody's faced with a lot of candidates, and you got to start somewhere, and you look at someone who sent you a resume which it appears that didn't even read the job ad, that's a quick decision to make, or an easy decision to make.
Yeah. So in the history of, what's interesting is now there's lots of venues to get your resume out. But when I was in college, which was in the 80s, I had a friend who wrote their resume on a piece of glass, black glass. He was a graphic art student. So it cost him like $80, which back then was a lot of money. And he sent it in a nice padded envelope, and he got the job because it was very creative. And there have been stories of people making their resume on a piece of rubber or on a T-shirt or using the idea of resume, not the resume, as a way to communicate who they are. Like you're saying, Mark, if you're looking for a writer and you're looking at their resume, clearly it's got to be written well.
Yes.
But if I was an auto repair person, maybe not so much.
Well, in the way I think most people want, and I mean most managers and recruiters and HR people want the resume to appear is simple. You know, a badly written paragraph in a resume for a writer doesn't bother me as much as a typo, you know, or just outright grammatical mistakes. Some of the basics, and I've seen those. But I think it does go back to conveying very quickly your credentials, why you're worth taking more time on, why you're worth studying the resume and looking you up online. The purpose, as we said at the beginning, the purpose of the resume is to get the employer to take the next step with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So again, let's talking about the intention of the resume is to, and we'll say resume not just as a piece of paper. I think would you agree it's not just a piece of paper, it's all these other things.
Absolutely.
But the resume is this thing that's about you that makes me interested in you, right? So if I was a singer, perhaps my resume might be a YouTube video. Doesn't matter what I did that I would write down, but if I sing and I look great and I sing well, that's really good.
Well, except how do you get that person to look at the YouTube video?
Well, no, that's a great point. We can start. I don't want to jump ahead of ourselves, but that gets to when we talk a little bit later is how are people finding candidates, right? What tools are they using? Because what you're saying, which is common now, and I think you're right, the resume isn't quite dead, but I think we're getting to the point of its transformation where I, as a recruiter, are now using other tools to find you. I could look you up on LinkedIn, which isn't necessarily a resume, but in LinkedIn, you may have your work product there because I can show my products. Or I may look for you on Google and find a video that you made or a blog post that you made. Or if you're a programmer, I would look at your GitHub site. And GitHub is a site where programmers go and kind of share code and kind of show off what they're doing, which has nothing to do with a resume.
Right.
Well, it contributes to the resume, though.
And again, if we're talking about the original idea of a resume, which is that piece of paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that the resume today really has to be sort of your own information central, which you use to craft essentially the pitch to a particular employer. So, my resume, the file that I have on my computer marked resume is several pages long. I would never send that document as it is to an employer. First, I'd research the employer, read the job ad, and then go back to that resume to pull out the information that I could use to fairly quickly customize, a 1 or a 1.5 page resume that I would then share with the employer. But I think everybody needs to have some place, some document, a single thing on their computer or on their desk or wherever they keep it that really has all of the details of their story and which can be the basis of the resume that they actually send in response to a job posting or a recruiter's call. And what I'm basically saying, and I might be getting ahead of us again, Lauren, is you have to be ready to customize the resume that you send into the employer every time.
Well, I think you made a really good point. Let's talk about this. And Torin, you said it. You read the resume from the first job up until the most recent job. And the reason you said, and I'm paraphrasing, is that you want to know what the story is.
Absolutely.
And why is the story important to you?
Well, the story, it's extremely important because it shows how an individual has professionally unfolded in their effort, how they've immersed themselves in the responsibilities that they had in said role, how they were able to transition what they were doing, what they were learning to move to the next role. It may have shown me that they took a step back. They may have taken a bit of a demotion in title. They may have, from my own professional awareness, they may have taken a drop in pay or compensation. So it helps me to understand that this person is willing to do certain things if they have a longer vision. When I'm looking at a resume, I'm really challenging myself to look at a bit more than just what's on the piece of paper. I'm trying to get into the candidate's shoes, if you will, because when we have that organic conversation, if I do decide to connect with them, I want to be able to usher in just that genuine energy. I want them to feel open and trusting of me that they can have that conversation. And typically the way that they do that is if they feel like I do have that authentic care about who they are as a candidate. Too many recruiters, I believe, are simply looking, as Mark said, they are under the pressure. They have 200, 300, 400 resumes to move through. So their ability to create that rapport, that instant rapport, that authentic care, it may be a bit challenged. But for me, because I work with a smaller number, I'm able to do that. And I want that person to feel like, let me trust Torin enough to tell them every single detail about me because I feel like he's going to give me the best evaluation possible. So that story is incredibly important to me.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because it's really more important to you what kind of person they are.
Absolutely.
Versus what they know. Because I think we know now, I can teach you something, but I can't change who you are.
Recruitment for
me. Is that right?
Absolutely right.
And then not only in doing that, you're building the relationship with the person that you're reaching out to, so that first contact is even more potent.
More potent. They know that they get the feeling that I'm genuinely working for them, no matter what the outcome is. They trust that if I'm engaged with Torin, he's going to leave me with a much better experience. And for me, I feel like I have the responsibility, playing in the sandbox of being a recruiter, I need to leave them with that great experience so that when the next recruiter calls, that they're not, resistant. They're not willing to not take the call or not return the email. So it's always been important for me that we have a genuine interest in the person who is the subject of the conversation.
And Mark, I want to go to you in a second, but I wanted to share an experience I had just a couple of weeks ago. I had sent my resume and a article I wrote on talent acquisition software, which is software that recruiters use to track people. And I sent it to a company, and I got called pretty quickly within a day or two. And all the recruiter wanted to talk about was the article that I wrote. That they thought, well, hey, that was really great. That was valuable. I learned something. Now, obviously, I'm sending something of interest to the recruiter for their specific needs, but the resume wasn't as important as this content that I had created. Kind of going to what you were saying. So, Mark, I think this is a vein that I want to kind of explore around story and around what kind of person the candidate is. How important is that for them to share themselves?
Well, I think it's very important. I agree with Torin that you definitely want to understand as much as you can about the person, and how they progressed through their career, what their path was, where they may have decided, may have come to a fork in the road and decided to take this fork. You'll find out why maybe during the interview. And, I think once you've gotten the recruiter's attention or the hiring manager's attention, if they're serious about filling the role, they are going to spend some time with your resume. But I think your story, Lauren, also illustrates the importance of, the other components out there, such as your LinkedIn profile, such as if you're a writer, your clips. I always make sure, when I'm a freelance writer, so I don't send out resumes looking for full-time jobs, but I do send out resumes looking for freelance work. And I always make sure I include a link to my clips, samples of my work, so people, while they're reading the resume, can basically see the end product that I produce. I think both of those things are very important. What kind of individual you are, what kind of work you produce. I don't think the true nature of the individual becomes really apparent until you get on the phone and sit down with the person and start a person-to-person talk.
And maybe I'm going to stop you right there. Maybe that's why it's so critical that resumes share who you are as much as possible, who you really are, your authentic self, because we're going to find out anyway.
I think they have to share it in the context of the position that's in question. Meaning, and I don't think those are self-contradictory. Going back to my notion of looking for an editor and get lots of marketing resumes. You need to show the person with a resume that they're worth talking to because they can fulfill the job that you've got open right now. And the hiring manager doesn't view it as a job opening. I think they tend to view it as a problem, and it's something they got to solve in order to keep to their budget, keep to their schedule, and keep from being overworked and overworking the rest of the team. So that's where the context comes in. You need to tell the story within the context of your audience.
What do you think about that?
I agree with him 100%.
Yeah, I
but
think
again,
we both do.
Well, yeah. Again, you have to be able to convey a story, and I think that too many people write their resume from a sanitized angle, and they only speak to the job or the job description, if you will, and they fail to put that colorful text inside. That they struggle with how to insert who they are in that document, and I think that a great resume writer helps to bring that out and portray that story and portray them on that piece of paper. I'm gonna give a free plug, but maybe if they hear this, they'll sponsor the show. I just used topresume.com, which was awesome. It was like $125. They took my resume, which I have written hundreds and hundreds of times over, and they gave a product back fairly quickly. I think it was 2 iterations or maybe 3 of a really nice resume. I mean, something, and I'm not an expert at writing resumes. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm an expert at reading them and finding people, but not at writing them. And it was incredibly helpful. Most people are not good writers, right? Most people, and it comes out, right? Yeah, well, that's part of the reason why we did Rip the Resume, so that we could help people in a digestible format to kind of go through the steps of what does a good resume look like. I try to help them deconstruct their current version, and then, page by page, we help them put it back together again. So I agree with you. A lot of people do struggle with the writing aspect of it. They can tell a great story, but it's hard to put it on paper.
And so you help people rewrite their resume. So how would they find that if they wanted to?
They can go to Amazon.com and do a search for RIP, R-I-P, the resume. Or they can do a Google search for Rip the Resume. It's sold on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and Indie Books.
Cool. Little plug for you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk about more of the resources now that are available to people to get outside of that piece of paper. So a lot of us are technology workers or knowledge workers, or we have access to the internet, and that's part of our work. If we do, what would I do to kind of make myself more findable by a recruiter, but also more interesting?
Mark, if you don't mind, let me just jump in real quick. One of the things that I encourage candidates to do is create an introduction or an opening statement, 30-second elevator pitch, and drop it on SoundCloud, and put the SoundCloud inside the body of the email, and then, of course, attach the resume document.
So everyone who doesn't know, SoundCloud is a website for it's like YouTube, but for audio.
For audio.
So it's SoundCloud.com. In fact, we're going to be on SoundCloud as well as Mixcloud. And they go there, and then they can just record it from their computer.
Record from the computer. They can record from their cellular device, and it allows them, it doesn't have to be long, but it changes the introduction. So when you are expressing interest and sending out an email, I think that it adds context to the evaluation when the person reviewing it, be it the recruiter or the hiring manager, when they can hear your voice, they can understand the passion, they know the creative solution that you're offering up, it puts you in a different category of just simply including a lot of text and then ending it with another resume attachment.
So let's hear, I'm going to put you on the spot, Torin, but what's yours?
So Torin Ellis, human capital strategist, interview architect, diversity ambassador, a person genuinely interested in working with organizations that have a concern for diversity and inclusion, organizations that understand the value of diversity and inclusion, understanding where they currently are and where they'd like to be. I'm the person that will help them develop the plan to get you where you'd like to be.
And so that's what you would put on your Mixcloud or your SoundCloud?
Something like that.
Something like that. And
Sure.
then would you say, how would you contact me? Or just
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, you can point them to your website. You can point them to your resumes attached in the email. You can point them to other repositories where you have video or other audio or white papers, whatever the case may be. But sure, you use SoundCloud in a way that traditionally was built for music, but you manipulate that platform in a way that complements you and your professional endeavor. What I think a lot of candidates struggle with is, how do we use all of this technology in ways that complements us professionally? We see it as purely social media or music, but there's always another way to manipulate the platform.
Right. And Mark, do you have anything to say on that? Because I wanted to kind of get into some of the tools now that we're talking about, what people can use to expand their resume.
I think that the most important thing for people to bear in mind, and I don't think it's a natural thing, is they need to remember when they're writing their resume or using SoundCloud or posting something on YouTube, writing their LinkedIn profile, building their website, to show off their portfolio, whatever they're doing, they have to remember that they're not writing it to make themselves happy. They're writing it to communicate a message to somebody. And it's that somebody, it's that audience who's the most important thing. So even if you came up with some turn of phrase for your cover letter or your resume, a YouTube video or whatever it is, and you think it's tremendously clever and impressive, and other people read it and don't think very much of it, you need to listen to those other people. You're not writing for yourself. You're writing for the recruiter, the hiring manager, the people who you want to hire you.
Right. And just to say, I think it's really important that when you write a resume, and people don't do this, have two people take a look at it who write English well. I mean, whatever you're doing, you should have someone take a look at it, because irrespective of how good a writer you are, and I know my wife is an amazing writer. Alicia has written several books. Everything she writes gets edited by me or her mom, who's an amazing writer, etc. And that's how you write well. You write, you get feedback, you rewrite, you get feedback, you rewrite. So the same thing with recording. You record something, you redo it. Just kind of putting that out there, that I think we all agree, you really want to get this checked, right? And I'm sure, Mark, you can say as a writer, you have your stuff checked.
Oh, yeah. And I think you also have to really think about that audience. Stop me if we're coming to this later, Lauren, but you can't write one resume and send that to 1,000 employers. You're much better off spending your time creating a resume and creating a package on a employer-by-employer basis, a job-by-job basis. You'll send out fewer resumes, but you'll get responses to more of them. But if you send out 1,000 generic resumes to 1,000 different employers, you're probably not going to get very much in the way of response.
Let's talk about LinkedIn, because just about everybody is on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a resume, right? I mean, when you look at it on my profile, it's everything I've done chronologically and some other stuff. How can I leverage LinkedIn to help me along this process? Could it be my resume?
I don't think it will replace your resume, but I think it's a part of your resume.
I mean, what's the difference between my resume and my LinkedIn profile?
Well, there's a few different ways people find out about job openings. one is they see a job posting somewhere, on a website or the job board or wherever, or they get approached by a recruiter, or they hear about it from a friend. I think in many of those cases, the response is to send a resume first, and then if the employer is interested, they're probably going to go look at your LinkedIn profile and any other social media profiles you tell them about, just to get a deeper sense of you. But I've only a few times experienced somebody asking me for my LinkedIn profile over my resume.
I would agree. I don't think people ask for it, but it's now expected to put on the resume, the link.
Yes, which to me indicates it's a part of the resume, but it's not the resume. There'll be a lot of repetitive information, but LinkedIn also does give you the opportunity to sometimes go a little bit deeper in telling your story. It also does have endorsements, hopefully, from your connections. It might show an employer that you have connections within their company or within the industry, which tells a story unto itself.
I know a lot of recruiters who, when they look at someone's LinkedIn page, they're pleased when the person's following their company, right? Or if they look on Twitter, how much have they tweeted? If they have a Twitter account, and has it been like a year, or do they tweet a lot, and do they tweet on the subject matter that they're talking about, or have they even tweeted about the company that they're applying for? Right, all those things kind of determine part of the story, what kind of person this is.
Yeah, I want to just jump in real quick. If you go to increasingly more career portals, company career portals, you will notice that they give you the option of applying for a job with your LinkedIn profile.
Right,
Simply click on LinkedIn or apply with LinkedIn, and it will pull in all of your LinkedIn information from name, all of your contributions, work experience, and all of that other great stuff. And so it allows you to express interest in said role without having to attach a resume, if you will. So I think that, again, the resume itself may or may not be required, but there's always something that is a central source of evaluation in all of these engagements.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Were you going to add something to that?
No, I think, it points to the fact that employers control, really the way their process works. And some employers have decided that the LinkedIn profile is good enough and replace the resume for them, and that's fine. It also just means the job seeker has to make sure that their LinkedIn profile is up to date. I think there's too many people out there who set up a very bland LinkedIn profile and then don't look at it again for 2 years. I think you should always be looking at your LinkedIn profile and always updating it.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about was what should be in the resume. But I always put the number of, as a recruiter, as a talent acquisition director, I put in the results. How many people I hired, how many people my team hired. I think it'd be, and the feedback I've gotten when I include a copy of my book is like, wow, this guy's really interesting. He's got a deeper background. And when I create a resume or I create some material specific to that job, I think they feel like I've gone above and beyond. Right. So one of the things I do when I go to a job now is that an interview is I create like a whole packet. I print out everyone's LinkedIn page. I might print out, like I went to an interview to a nonprofit. I printed out the most important pages of their 990, which is their tax return. I printed out stuff that I found on the internet. So when I come, I have this whole set of notes and all my questions are printed out in a nice little booklet format. And they go, wow, this person did some homework. Right. And that becomes kind of the above and beyond my resume. That communicates. And I think what we're all saying is that everything you generate is communicating a story to the recruiter, to the hiring manager that's going to be positive for you. And so to expand on the resume was only in the past, and maybe up till now, the only thing you really had. Now I have LinkedIn, I have Twitter, I have YouTube. I mean, I think we'd all agree that if you made a little YouTube video that was appropriate for the job or appropriate for your career, that'd be great. That distinguishes you. I remember 22 years ago, someone applied for a job at the company I was at, and they did their whole resume in PowerPoint, which they got hired mostly because it was in PowerPoint. Because the person's like, wow, this person took the time to do this, so they must be really interested. And employers always want to find people who are passionate about their company. And two, they knew how to use PowerPoint well enough to make something that was interesting and a little entertaining.
So the question you asked a moment ago was what needs to be in that document. And I'll just quickly hit a few things. Number one, you said contribution numbers. And I think that numbers are extremely important. A lot of people don't know how to narrate that story by putting numbers in such. I think colorful phrases, descriptive adverbs and adjectives are important to put inside of the document. They help, create a more bold contribution of who you are. I think that people need to be able to show challenges and pain inside of a resume. What caused you struggle inside of the role, and how did you overcome that struggle? Because that suggests to the person reviewing it that you are ready for perhaps more responsibility, or you can bring that same contribution to our organization. I think that one of the things that we miss so much when we look at resumes, we fail to put connecting statements inside of our resume, and it doesn't show us how you move from this place to this place. And then last but not least, I think that it's extremely important that if you do have those other ancillary attributions, whether they be white papers, whether it be research work, video, whether it be, sound, if you will, I think that we do need to have some section, if you will, that captures all of that and expresses that that's available to the person reviewing the document.
My name is Loren Epstein, and you're listening to You're Hired here on 96.7 FM in Arlington, Virginia. Today we're talking about the end of resume, and I think we're learning that it's more not just the end of resume, but the transformation of the resume and what a great one is really all about. I'm here with Mark Feffer and Torin Ellis, my experts. And Mark, what did you want to add to what Torin just said?
No, I think he's exactly right. I think actually I wanted to just add something to what you said, Lauren, about doing your research on the employer and making sure that they see that you've done that. And you were talking about going into your interview, fully armed with a lot of background research, so you could show your commitment really to your wanting this role. I just add that you need to include that somewhere in the resume as well. You need to be able to let the company see that you're aware of their current business, situation, of their current business strategy, and that you've taken the time even before you've gotten the call in.
I think that might be a great place for SoundCloud. That if you just kind of did all your homework and then recorded answers to some questions you think they might have. Like, hi, my name's Lauren, and why I'm interested in working for your company is because I see that you've been growing in this field, or that you've had this challenge, and that's great that you are about to get bought, and so on. And that will definitely distinguish me from other folks.
Yeah, I think anything you do that shows you've put in extra effort, for that company, to understand that company, is going to go over well.
And what are some of the other tools, Torin, that folks can use to distinguish themselves and to expand on this concept of resume?
Of course, they can use all of social media's platform. One of the tools that's extremely great, KNOWEM, KNOWEM.com, knowem.com. It's a platform that allows you to search whether or not your name or a particular name has been taken on blogging platforms, on social media platforms, and it searches all of them at one particular time. And the reason I think that that's important is because I think that each individual is a brand, and I think that it's incumbent upon them to protect their brand. And so Torin Ellis is saved all across the internet, and now I'm able to manipulate the various platforms in ways that benefit me in the work that I do. So I use Instagram for one thing. I use Twitter for something entirely different. And as a candidate, what you can do is use Instagram to show perhaps your awareness.
What is Instagram? Because a lot of folks may not know what Instagram is.
I apologize. Instagram is typically a site where people put up pictures and quotes and different happenings in their life. And so I think as a candidate, you can use Instagram to show pictures of a particular industry, or you can show quotes that motivate or show your ability to lead or collaborate with other team members. You can use Twitter to tweet out articles that impact your industry. You can use Facebook to.
But now when someone uses Twitter, I can see, and I go to their Twitter account, I can see everything that they posted on Twitter. Or rather, should be on Instagram and Twitter for a while back.
Absolutely. And again, it's about building that footprint that shows that you are a positive force, if you will, in the work that you do. Social media doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be a purely entertainment thing. It can be something that has professional acumen or pay professional dividends for you. So I always suggest to candidates to use all of social media. I suggest to candidates to use different platforms like SoundCloud or Vimeo.
But getting less
YouTube.
specific, so people know exactly what they can use it for. So with Noam, it sounds like with Noam, I can find make a blog, or someone could find if I made a blog.
So for instance, you can go to Noam and you can type in Lauren Epstein and see if it's available on WordPress or on blogger.com or on Twitter.
So then I can kind of see then I can pick a name, either my name or some
other name to go by.
That then I go, that's my brand. And then when I set up all these other things, I'm the only one using that.
That's right. And then you can point employers to those various platforms to see
let's
your
talk
contribution.
About them. So we talked about Twitter. With Twitter, people can set up a Twitter account and tweet about things in 140 characters or less that they're interested in professionally and personally, that demonstrate who they are as a person. And then with Instagram, which is just pictures, I could put pictures of what may have accomplished, or me at the workplace, or things about work and what I do. And then we talked about, so SoundCloud could be clips of me talking about myself for 30 seconds, maybe something I've done if I've given a presentation. I can put it up there.
Absolutely. You can use SoundCloud for that. And I want to go back to Instagram and all of these social media platforms. They don't have to be sterile and only professional. You can show that personal side of yourself. I always encourage candidates to just simply be responsible in what it is that they share on any of these platforms. But you use these platforms to give the person evaluating your credentials a more well-rounded observation of who you are.
And on some of these sites, you can't see, like for instance, on Facebook, I can shut my Facebook down to anyone but just my friends, right? So not everyone can see my Facebook if I don't want them to. That can be my private space.
Well, all of them, you can shut Instagram down, you can shut Twitter down, you can lock them down or privatize them to a degree, if you will. Mm-hmm. But again, but
LinkedIn, you can't.
You can even lock down your LinkedIn profile to a degree. So the point for me is, as a candidate, I don't want any of those, and I wouldn't encourage a candidate to have them locked down. Allow a person in to evaluate who you are as the entire person.
See, I mean, me personally, I like my Facebook just locked down.
Well, and if I can jump in, just say, I think many candidates just sort of assume that Facebook is their personal space, and they don't really pay attention to what they post there, and do themselves a lot of harm. I think everything Torin is saying is correct. I think that they also have to realize, candidates have to realize, that when you're building your brand, everything anybody sees about you is your brand. So if you've decided that Facebook is just going to be where you let it all hang out, and your possible employer, recruiters and whoever, are going to see the pictures that your friends might think is funny, but the employer may not like. He or she may get the message that, this is not the kind of person we want working for our company. So...
And with that, I just want to, sorry, we're running we're coming to the end of the show. I just want to let people know you're listening to You're Hired. I'm your host, Lauren Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 in Arlington, Virginia. And today we've been talking about resumes with my guests, Mark Feffer and Torin Ellis. I want to thank you both. Do you have any parting words for our guests, for our audience?
I would just, this is Mark, and I would just say, remember your audience. Remember, it's all about them. It's hard. That's hard to do, but it's all about them.
And Torin?
And so for me, I think that it's important that anyone listening understand the value of the resume. Your resume has to tell a story. It needs to showcase to me that you will bring creative solution to one of my clients, or if I'm an internal recruiter, that you will bring creative solution to my organization. Your resume needs to express some level of interestingness, if you will. I don't want to necessarily bring a boring individual in for consideration. So do everything that you can to be interesting.
And thank you guys. So you've been listening to You're Hired. Come back next week for a new episode where we talk about jobs and careers. Thanks very much. Appreciate you guys being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.